which you can find on all podcasting platforms and on their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. Let's bring him in. Geoff Mosher is here to talk a little Erdies, not Birdie, the shortstop for the Marlins, right?
No, definitely not. But I would love to turn this into a Phillies at 4 segment. I could just talk. I'm so giddy about the Phillies win last night.
I like it. Phillies at 4. We'll scrap the Eagles for the time being and get to the Phillies who play tonight. By the way, you can listen to the Phillies and the Marlins tonight on 97.3 ESPN. You can also listen to the Eagles and the Rams this Sunday, back to 4:25. No more 1 o'clocks until they play Washington again. And then, by the way, they only have one other 1 o'clock game the rest of the year. John Gannon's Arizona Cardinals will be in Philly on New Year's Eve for that one. Geoff, I want to get your takeaway first on the move the Eagles made yesterday, bringing in Bradley Roby. The listeners, you probably have heard of him, have some familiarity, but what's the messaging and the role that he might have? And I can't imagine is he going to play in the game this week?
I mean, stranger things have happened. I would have told you last year. In fact, I think I did say last year on the podcast that, hey, this Linval Joseph pickup is pretty good, but he's obviously got to take some time, get into shape. You know, he might not help the Eagles out for a week or two, and they throw him in, and he started the game and played a lot of the game. He was just in great shape, which is hard for those big guys to be in, and sort of maybe set an unfair standard now for street free agent pickups. But Roby, it's not like Roby has been on his couch all year long. He was in camp with the New Orleans Saints. He's a guy who's played inside and outside in his career. You know, usually when you're a cornerback and you're on the street now and you've got a little age, because teams are going to view you as a nickel, as an inside corner, someone who doesn't run as well as maybe you did 5 or 6 years ago. And that's okay, because that's what the Eagles need. Roby did play nickel with Houston, with New Orleans, with Denver. So he's familiar with the spot. So what has to be seen is, do the Eagles think he's ready to go in and play nickel, or just play immediately, maybe this Sunday against LA, or does he need some time to get, whether either conditioning or in the defense? But it would not surprise me if he was there. And the reason for it, Mike, is obvious, and that's James Bradberry cannot be a full-time nickel. It's $1 million plus a year to be a full-time nickel. It's not the best position for him right now. They don't have any other bodies they don't have faith in Mario Goodrich to be able to take the job over. Sidney Brown was out with a hamstring. I'm not sure he's a full-time nickel back either. He was situational 2 weeks ago when he played. Bradley Roby is a guy who, like Josiah Scott last year, is a nickel back and can play that and has the experience to do it.
Yeah, this week's tough, though, because you need a nickel guy, right? If Cooper Kupp is back and he is activated into the window, Cooper Kupp would be a handful for James Bradberry and anybody else.
Yeah, well, it sort of goes back to, not only do you need a nickel, but you need your secondary to be playing, everybody in your secondary to be playing where they're best fit to play. And some of the plays that Washington made, I wrote about this on InsideTheBirds.com, and not cool GIFs. Some of the plays Washington made were breakdowns in either communication or understanding of responsibility. There were a couple of times, specifically when Washington used motion and bunch formations, like 3 receivers to one side and tight to the line of scrimmage, and 2 in front, or 1 in front, 2 behind, 2 in front, 1 behind, where the Eagles defensive backs were receiver and the other receiver wide open and uncovered. So that's clearly a communication and a responsibility that most likely stems from guys playing in roles that they haven't played as much. So you would like some
help back with Sidney Brown and Justin Evans. But
Justin Evans, I guess the Eagles are really leaning into guys who played nickel corner for the Saints at times last year. So he's another guy who was part of the Eagles goal package, but which is 3 safeties. But he would be the one that was in the slot, because that's where he's from Terrell Edmonds and Reed Blankenship. There were times he was all right at it. There were times he was, a guy on a 1-year contract who at one point in his career missed 3 straight years with injury. So coming along, I would suspect that if he's healthy, he's a guy that will see some nickel reps if they don't feel like Roby can either play or play it at, can only play a certain amount. I imagine you would see Justin Evans in there. And if Sidney Brown play, there might be certain packages flexed out where he's in the in that inside corner role or nickel role.
Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds podcast. Check out the latest podcast and go to InsideTheBirds.com as Jeff has a good piece on the Eagles. The problems they had against the Commanders. And if they had those problems against the Commanders, did you see stuff that Commanders were doing? Is it more personnel-based on what Philly's doing as to why they had those issues?
Yeah, I mean, it was clearly something that the Commanders did, and it's probably something they ordinarily do anyway, not just to beat the Eagles, but Eric Bieniemy comes from the Andy Reid coaching tree, we know, and there was a lot of motion, there was misdirection, and like I said, formations, bunch formations, tight to the line of scrimmage, formations, with trickier route concepts where you're making the defense either try to cover it in man or try to pass it off, like a man-match style of defense, or you're in a zone. And if you're in a zone, right, and they're putting 3 receivers on one side and you have a corner and safety on one side, you're in a 2 deep zone, well, they got more numbers than you, right? So those are called flood concepts, when you just flood the one side of the zone with more receivers than defenders. So Washington was able to strike on some of those too. I'm saying this as if that's what Washington did all the time. It's not. And I'm saying this as if Washington was great. No, Sam Howell threw 1 touchdown pass. He had about 3 passes that could have been picked off. He was hit 10 times. He was sacked 5 times. So it's not like Washington had its way with the Eagles defense. I don't want to make it sound that way. But when they did do well, I noticed it was because of lapses in coverage.
Yeah, I know that we may see it go. Now, it's not definitive because, as you said, we don't know what Roby's role is going to be. Is he going to be active? Is he going to play? Is Evans going to play some slot? What about Sidney Brown? Could he be a guy? But if it's Job, Bradbury, and Slay again, you might see similar concepts from what the Rams want to try to do to you.
Well, most teams, and that's why I said Washington might have done this regardless who they're playing, most teams just have an offensive identity, right? So Sean McVay, his identity is also to use a lot of motion, to, move his wide receivers around. This kid that they got as a rookie, Puka Nacua, has moves around. If Cooper Kupp comes back, he moves around a lot anyway. So it's not something that Sean McVay is going to look at Eagles tape and say, "Oh, I got to start moving guys around and playing bunch formation." No, that's stuff that they ordinarily do anyway. So it's sort of like what they do offensively. I don't want to call it kryptonite for what the Eagles do defensively, but yeah, if you had to play Job outside and you had to play Bradbury inside, McVay will absolutely attack that. And the thing about Matt Stafford that really shows up on tape is that, and this is sort of obvious because he is a good quarterback, but he's a very decisive throwing quarterback between the numbers, Mike, into tight windows. He's not afraid, and he throws the ball well because he has a really good arm. There are a lot of quarterbacks who are good but still struggle sometimes to throw the ball between the numbers into tight windows, and so they're in offenses designed to kind of create guys open instead of the quarterback just rifling it in there. He will rifle it in there. So that's one thing that the Eagles D-backs, no matter who they are on Sunday, are going to have to be conscious of, because the Eagles will play a lot of zone. They'll play a lot of man match. They'll play a lot of different things on the back end, but Stafford will not be afraid to challenge it.
We're talking with Geoff Mosher, Football at 4. Yeah, Eagles and Rams this weekend. A lot of defensive stuff because we don't know, is Bradbury going to be in the slot? Is he going to move back outside? Is Roby going to be active? Is Sidney Brown, Justin Evans, or one of those guys moving to the slot or going to get more snaps at safety? So a lot there. But what about linebacker? Give me your kind of thoughts on Nick Morrow's role moving forward. I know Dean's not going to be ready to play, but this is going to come up soon enough.
Yeah, I think Nick Morrow is playing fast and playing downhill, but I also think that's a function of how good the defensive line in front of him has been for him to be able to just kind of shoot into certain gaps or get easily around blocks and make tackles. I'm not trying to undersell him at all. I'm saying, like, sometimes you'll see some great linebacker play like Fred Warner, who's out there covering anybody, who's just beating up guards, right, trying to pull into them and throwing them to a side and making tackles. But right now Morrow is being kept clean, and that's a really big key for him to succeed. I think maybe there's a chance when Nakobe Dean comes back that you might see Morrow stick around and be like the pass nickel, whereas, they're always in nickel. It's very rare they're not nickel, but, Zach Cunningham is more of a run defender. They're playing well, by the way, Zach Cunningham also. It's not getting beat per se, but they're playing, the zones to keep them the action in front of them. And they're using their linebacker. They're playing the right type of schemes to take advantage of what their linebackers do well and limit what they don't do well. I would say Morrow has probably earned some playing time even when Nakobe Dean comes back, and maybe you'll just see two different linebacker rotations.
Well, and, it's funny because somebody had asked me earlier about, the defensive line, they do rotations. Why not linebackers, where one series it's Morrow, one series it's Dean, to keep those guys fresh? Why don't teams feel the necessity to keep the linebackers as fresh as they do the interior or edge rushers?
Yeah, sometimes they do, Mike, and the Eagles have in the past. If you remember a couple of years ago, they had Nate Gary and Duke Riley, and then there was Duke Riley and Camus Grugier-Hill. They were rotating guys based on down and distance quite a bit. But remember that somebody in that linebacker unit usually has to wear that green helmet. And has to wear the green dot on the helmet and be that leader of the defense that tells everybody what the call is and where they're going. So if you got a linebacker wearing a green dot, he's got to be on the field quite a bit, or else you're going to have two different guys given play calls.
Yeah. All right. Let's look at some offense stuff. By the way, Nick Sirianni did speak today and got the opportunity. He was asked a lot. There was some talk about, was he calling plays? Did he take away play calling? I don't know. I don't view him as a micromanager type as much as, hey, I might have input. This is what I want. Go execute it. Where do you kind of look at the way he's handled these two new coordinators so far?
Yeah, not to parrot what Nick Sirianni said, but it is something we talked about a lot in the offseason when we talked about the change of coordinators, that defense would be more sort of fascinating than offense, because the offense is never, even with Shane Steichen, was never just about Shane Steichen. It's a combination of Nick Sirianni, who is an offensive-minded coach. It's Kevin Patullo, who is the pass game coordinator and now the associate head coach. It's Jeff Stoutland, who's the running game head coach, and now Brian Johnson, who's the offensive coordinator. It's four central parts to the offense that come together. And so it's pretty common, I believe, even on game day, that Nick Sirianni knows every call that's going on. It's not like he's ever surprised, oh, you made that call. No, he's got the headset on too. Mm-hmm. So his interactions have always been, now maybe a little bit more this year because Brian's new at it and the offense hasn't been, poetic looking at all the times as it did last year. But it's not like he's not. I've not been told, and I don't get the vibe that he's micromanaging and that this is causing any friction or that it's anything out of the ordinary.
All right, Jeff. This week the offense has to deal with Aaron Donald, and he's going to be probably matched up with Sua Opeta. I would imagine the Rams, who do move Donald around, are going to say, hey, there's a new guy. Let's see what he does this week against Aaron Donald. And I asked this question in a way of, is Donald so disruptive, and we know that he is, that he could disrupt the whole offense winning that battle, or the Eagles going to have to do something they don't like to do, maybe double a lot to help him out?
Well, yeah, they're certainly going to have to double. There's no question about it. And I see the Rams are playing some five-man fronts, and I don't know if they've always done that, but I imagine that is, because they're trying to make it so that teams can't double them. So you'll probably see a tight end kept in, as a sixth blocker so that you can get a double. It's always a fun cat and mouse game, isn't it? Like we have a four-man front. Well, we have five offensive linemen, so we can double team you. Well, we're going to put five men at the line of scrimmage now, so you can't double team us. Well, we're going to put a tight end at the line of scrimmage, so now we can double team you. Well, then fine, you don't have a tight end that you can throw the ball to. It's great. I love football, but I think you're going to have to figure out ways to get multiple bodies on Aaron Donald. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do. I have some concerns about his ability to stunt around the tackles. I just don't think Mailata has played great football. I think he's played really good football, but you saw Chase Young knock him back a couple of times, including one time where he one-handed sacked Jalen Hurts. He yanked him down from his jersey after beating Mailata. So Mailata's so big, and Donald is so kind of short, compact, and fast that I wonder if they're going to try to get him stunted around edge, which, by the way, takes you away from double teams, right? And then sort of breaks down your protection scheme when you start moving guys around like that. And it gives a nice little edge speed to a guy right now in Mailata who's playing fine, but every once in a while can get beat by a good one.
Yeah, it's interesting because Josh brought that up earlier in the week, too, that he thought Mailata had a little trouble against Young. And he got the one sack. And obviously, you look at this offensive line and you just always take for granted that they're winning every single week and they're battling up front. Washington has a really good front. Would you say the Rams are similar, or is it just Donald that you have to contend with?
I watched a little bit of their tape. There were a couple of guys that were that jumped out to me, not just Aaron Donald. They also have some linebackers that are pretty active. They got a defensive end named Jonah Williams who came over from the 49ers, and he kind of jumped out at me. And I think that's probably because he's came up through the 49ers culture, and it seems like all their defensive players play with a really high motor and have great get-off. So his number 92, defensive end. So he jumped out at me a little bit on tape, but I'll watch a little bit more. But I mean, to the degree of an Aaron Donald, or like you said, all those 4 first-rounders on Washington, no, obviously it's not the same.
All right, Geoff Mosher is here, Football at 4, but you said you wanted to talk a little Philly. So while you're here, the lineup just came out. I'll let you
nice.
share it with the listeners with me. It's the same as last night. Schwarber, Turner, Bohm, Harper, Realmuto, Castellanos, Stott, Pache, and Rojas. That's all for your starter, Aaron Nola. And the Phillies starting lineup is brought to you by Clark's Moving and Storage. There you go. Same as last night, no surprise.
I feel for Marsh because I think throughout most of the year, he had the highest OPS on the team, right? And he's a good defensive player himself. And, when there are right-handers in, I'm sure he will get his at-bats. But you look at that Rojas at-bat in the third inning and how significant that was, not just to that inning, but the game, to getting the pitch count up, the way he battled for a guy who's just came up this year, battles Luzardo, then gets the hit, scores the run. He's exciting. I don't have I don't know why Shane Victorino pops into my head.
I said the same thing earlier. The Victorino at bat against the Brewers, but it's not Rojas that has, you've said Marsh, but it's really they're playing Pache over Marsh. And Pache had the play in left field last night that maybe Marsh makes probably, but it's a play that Schwarber probably doesn't make, but he came up and got a base hit.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. It is Pache who takes Marsh's spot there. I still think before that's said and done, whether it's this series or the next one, Marsh is going to give us something, to remember.
Well, against the Braves don't have a left-handed starter, so Marsh, if they advance, would be back in the lineup pretty much full-time. And you saw they went right to Marsh last night when there was a right-handed pitcher. So his role will be limited, and hopefully the Phillies take care of business tonight. I'm going tonight, Geoff Mosher.
Oh, nice. I actually me and my wife had an offer of tickets last night, but it was such late notice, and we couldn't, we got kids, we got activity, we couldn't do it, and I was so bummed. I would have loved to have gone.
The last Phillies playoff game I was at, Ryan Howard went down with like a ton of bricks.
Oh, man.
Yep.
That sucks.
That's the last time I was at Citizens Bank Park.
Time for your mojo to but if they lose tonight, Mike, you are not allowed back in a Phillies playoff game.
I'm out, right? I'm out. Football at 4, Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can find on any podcasting platform or on their YouTube channel. Simply search Inside the Birds. He's Geoff Mosher. He'll be back on Monday. By the way, Eagles traveling to L.A. to take on the Rams. Probably a pretty big contingent of Eagle fans out there. So, we'll have that game here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Mosher, good to see you, buddy.
All right, Mike. Take care. Talk to you soon.
All right, Geoff Mosher, of course, from Inside the Birds for Football at 4.